Hey, TJI listeners, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and now YouTube.
Please like us, subscribe, and leave some comments. We want to know what you like, what you want to hear more about, where we're going.
This just in, we're doing another podcast. This time it's going to be a little different. My guest, I'm the host. My guest will be Richard Ray. People want to know more about Richard. He had a long career in broadcasting. I did not have that long of a career, and our podcast is really about media personalities, past and present, and fun, exciting stories behind the scenes. So I thought, well, why not talk to Richard about that? And then he's got a big trip coming up. So welcome, Richard, to your podcast.
This is fun being a guest on my podcast, but you have been the host all along, so it works.
Well, we always ask people, how did you get into TV? What was the path? And it's kind of surprising. The answers are kind of similar, kind of back into it, but you have your own story.
Yeah, and it's a pretty long, involved story, and we've talked about bits and pieces of it before, but I grew up in a small town in Minnesota, small community. Both my grandparents were dairy farmers. Of course, that doesn't give you much inroads into the TV business and that sort of thing. But I went away to the University of Minnesota after I graduated, wanted to get out of that small town. And I changed my major a bunch of different times. I had no idea what I was going to do, to tell you the truth, until I got to be like a senior in college. And I had applied to law school, and I just didn't get into law schools I wanted to get into. And then I thought, do I really want to do another 3 years of school? But I'd become enthralled with watching TV news. Now we're talking about, this is the era when the Vietnam War was going on, when TV news was in everybody's house every night, 5, 6, 10, whatever. And I just became fascinated with TV news. And I stumbled on a broadcast journalism program at the University of Minnesota that was a one-year master's program. Long story short, I got into it and I figured out I don't need another degree. I need to get a job. So at that point, I started to try to get a job. Well, it was really tough. Affirmative action had just kicked in, and it needed to. Newsrooms were like almost exclusively white males, and they were starting to hire women and minorities. And it was just a bad time to be a white male coming into the business. So I ended up taking a job as a photographer. I fudged a little bit on my experience and told him I could run a film camera. And fortunately, the guy that I replaced stayed there for 2 weeks and was able to train me. So I actually started in one of the smallest markets in America, Rochester, Minnesota, as a photographer, with the idea that they would let me eventually work into a reporter's role. And again, long story short, but that did happen. And then I went from I went from Rochester, Minnesota, which was a really small market, spent about 3 years there, then went to Des Moines, Iowa, which was starting to get middle market. Cedar Rapids was a real sideways step. Cedar Rapids to Nashville was a big step for me. The story on that is I had become so discouraged by my lack of ability to get a reporter's job in a big market that I had taken a management job. I was actually assistant news director, and I produced the 10 o'clock news. And just happened to get a call out of a blue from a news director in Nashville who had seen a reporter's tape. He said he wanted to see an updated tape. I said, well, I really don't have any updated stuff because I've been this newsroom manager for a while. And he said, oh, I got this job as a special projects producer. He says, I'll fly you down. We can talk about both jobs. So I went to Nashville, and the fact of the matter is he had this special projects job that paid a lot more than he was offering as a reporter, and I had a wife and 2 little kids, and so I took that job. And again, I've told this story. It was good for me because I'd been a photographer, I'd been a newsroom manager, I'd done all these things as a producer, and when I finally figured out I don't want to do this other stuff, I want to be a reporter, and a new news director in Nashville said, okay, white male reporters are a dime a dozen. You're going to have a hard time moving up, but you're a good producer. You can move up fast. But I'll tell you what, if you've got off time and you want to produce a story or two every week, you can do that. And it ended up, I would do one story a week, but it would be a great story, which builds the audition tape, which gets you to the big market. So I had a really good audition tape put together, and I got to Dallas, and that's where things really got fun.
So the idea is you keep moving markets, because you talked about a little market, a medium market,
Right.
big market. So the idea is you keep moving up because you make more money. Is that the bigger audience, more money?
Yeah, and the truth is you really can't make a living in those small markets. I mean, especially if you're married and got a couple of kids. My wife was working. I'm still just struggling. I'm taking on all these extra jobs. At that time, I could do like freelance stuff for the network and that kind of thing, and just to make enough money to make a living. I didn't really make even a decent living until I got to Nashville, which at the time was, I think, high 30s maybe. It's maybe a little bigger market than that. But then even when I got to Dallas, it was the 8th largest market in America. And I thought, oh man, I'm going to make big money when I get to Dallas. Well, back then they didn't really make great money, but it was enough. And then over a period of years, they moved me up into part-time anchor, weekend anchor, and all this other stuff. And it got to the point where finally in Dallas, I was making a really, really good living.
Now you got a career.
Yeah.
But you were singularly focused on being a reporter. What was the motivation there? What drove you?
I talked about being enthralled by TV news. This was, again, late 60s, early 70s, and I'm watching this WCCO TV out of Minneapolis, St. Paul. That was just a feeder for correspondents for the CBS News. Evening News with Walter Cronkite and later Dan Rather. And they just had all these great reporters coming out of there and going to the network to become network correspondents. And that's what I really wanted to do. I wanted to travel the world and be a network correspondent and travel the nation, cover the biggest stories and that kind of thing. The funny part about that was I actually got a chance to go to the network in like 1980. And circumstances kind of worked out where it would have been like I would have been like in AAA, not really the major leagues. It was a job servicing the affiliates, not really working for the evening news. And I'm really glad I didn't get it, because about that time things started to change in the business too, because it became a lot more attractive for guys who had been correspondents, living out of a suitcase, no time with their families, often wrecked their marriage and all that kind of stuff. They wanted to come back and get the kind of affiliate job that I had, where, as you know, you and I were there during the golden age, where I traveled like a network correspondent often, but I wasn't gone all the time. It was only the biggest stories, and usually no more than a couple of weeks at a time that you'd be gone. And so it really was kind of the best of both worlds. I could have a family life. I could live in a city where I could raise my kids. I was making money. I didn't have to live out of a suitcase. So I kind of ended up getting the job I wanted without becoming a network correspondent, if that makes any sense.
That makes perfect sense. And I worked in Dallas market. One thing I noticed, because I worked in some small markets, editor, photographer, that kind of thing. When I got to Dallas, I went, man, all these people have been here for a long time and the money's pretty good. You could actually raise a family by working here.
What a concept.
What a concept. So the quest, and I'm from the South, so this was natural for me. You are not from the South, but you adopted Dallas as your home. You had kids. It's a good place to raise a family here, and you do get some pretty good recognition. So how did you learn to be on the air? Like, describe some of the first times when they went, okay, you're live.
I was like one of the worst radio reporters in history of radio. I had, and I say that only because I had a really young sounding voice. When I was a young man, I sounded like I was like 15 years old. And that's back in the day when traditionally the people who were in TV news would have been the guys who had deep radio voices, and they were doing radio, and they sounded like Ted Baxter, and they had, that kind of thing. Yeah. I didn't have that. And I really struggled with that. And a lot of times I would get feedback from news directors and whatever, well, your delivery and your voice and everything, it doesn't sound mature enough. So I struggled with that for a long time. The irony of that is when I finally matured, by the time I'd gotten to Dallas, I had a very distinct voice that at least I'm told is pleasing, people like to listen to. And the industry had changed too. They didn't want the Ted Baxter. For young people who don't know who Ted Baxter is, and we have to keep reminding ourselves, there was a Mary Tyler Moore show. It was about a TV newsroom, a comedy in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the anchor man was this airheaded guy with this big, deep voice named Ted Baxter. Well, so when I say a Ted Baxter voice, people of our generation, Brian and I, we know what that means. But basically, it was the old time. You had to have this booming baritone voice that I didn't have early in my career.
So even for young people now, if you've seen the movie Anchorman,
Yeah.
it was kind of like that, male-dominated, that kind of thing, but you had to have that deep voice.
And
so who hired you? How did you get the job in Dallas?
The job in Dallas I got through, this is an interesting thing that only people of my generation, there used to be in broadcast, there was a magazine called Broadcast News, and there was a woman in the back whose name escapes me right now, but she would advertise that she was an agent, that she could get you a job. If you send her a tape, she'd send the tapes around. Well, she wasn't really an agent. She was really just kind of a headhunter for these companies. So, but I had sent her this tape, and she sent it to Dallas, and she got me the interview in Dallas. And so I came to Dallas, and again, I thought I was going to start making some decent money. And they offered me what I thought was ridiculously low money for a top 10 market. Shirley Barish, I think her name was. And I called Shirley, and I said, they're only offering, no, I think you should take that. I think you should take that. Well, I didn't pay her anything. She didn't get a percentage or anything. So she was really working for KDFW TV, and she convinced me to take a salary that I thought was too low, but it worked out great because my salary grew as things changed in Dallas and as Dallas became paid more competitively with other top 10 markets, and over time it worked out really good.
Who was the news director at that time?
Wendell Harris was the news director at that time.
Wendell Harris.
Yeah, here's an interesting story. They brought in two people for interview. The other one was Adlai Stevenson Jr. Now, again, Adlai Stevenson ran for president against somebody and got clobbered years and years and years ago. Anyway, but so he was a kind of a name guy, and he was out of Chicago. But they hired me, and they brought me in. They told me, you're going to be our star reporter at 10 o'clock. And from the get-go, really did use me that way as sort of the go-to reporter, which caused me some trouble with the other, because I roll into this newsroom, and there was an assistant news director, Sue Kavalierski, I think is her name, a lovely lady, but she's telling, we're bringing this stud in from Nashville. He's going to show you guys how it's done. And I had no idea she'd been telling people that. So I'm kind of getting the cold shoulder here and there, and I'm like, it didn't take me long, people got to know me.
Yeah, show us what you got, gunslinger. Yeah, that is true. I've seen newsrooms where you bring in somebody new. This guy's going to turn things around. So describe the agent process, because I didn't know you needed an agent to get a job.
Well, in Dallas, you didn't. In fact, they wouldn't deal with agents, which is another thing that was really odd about Channel 4 at that time. They simply would not deal with agents if they didn't have to. So if they would hire some big name person we talked to Ted Dawson a couple weeks ago, and of course he had an agent when he came in. They talked to him and everything. But in my case, having an agent wasn't going to do you any good, because they were going to tell you how much you were going to pay, and there just really wasn't any negotiation at all. There was a set of circumstances that allowed me some negotiation room later when they wanted me to take this tri-anchor deal out of Fort Worth that we talked about a while back, that I was able to get more money. Then finally kind of got into the point where it was a good competitive salary. But that's the difference between a lot of places, because in most markets in America, even some of the smaller ones, you send your agent calls and says, here's the deal, here's what we want, and they deal with management, and the agent works it out with them, and then the agent gets 10% of whatever your
10%.
Yeah, at least that's what it was back in the day. I never had an agent. Shirley Barish was not really an agent. She called herself an agent, but she was just a headhunter for stations like KDFW TV. They didn't want to deal with agents. They wanted somebody just to find them a decent reporter where they didn't have to deal with an agent.
But the thing is, you need some sort of advocate most of the time. Blind tapes and resumes usually don't get you the job.
Well, the other avenue was there were consulting groups at that time. They're still around. Maggot out of, I know they're out of a suburb of Cedar Rapids. I actually got to know some of the people who were running that, but TV stations would hire these consultants, and then the consultants would look around. Mike Ducey told a story when he was on with us about how the Maggot station in Cedar Rapids was the ABC affiliate, and they wanted Ducey out of the market because he was so good. So Maggot called KDFW and said, you need to look at this guy, and sent him his tape. So that was another way you could, without an agent, get noticed, somebody else to be an advocate for you. And that's pretty good advertising. This guy's really good. We want him out of the market. You should hire him.
Well, was there a point at KDFW? Now it's a top 10 market. Now it's a top 5 market, right. I believe.
Top 4 market, if you can believe that.
Top 4 market. Yeah, unbelievable. Crazy. Was there a point when you're doing your daily job, covering stories, where you went, I think I made it. I've made it here. I've made my mark.
Shortly after I got here, and they started using me really like the star reporter. I mean, there was a lot of good reporters on the staff, but generally, if something big happened, it had been a few years into it. There were other photographers I worked with, but there was a great photographer named Max Stacy, who's still around. Max, love you, brother. And if something big happened anywhere, if there was a hurricane about to hit the East Coast, or earthquake that hit San Francisco, the news director's response was, where's Max, where's Rich, get him on a plane and go. And so that's what I tell a story about. That's the kind of reporter I'd always dreamed of being. And I got to do that without having to live out of a suitcase and work for the network.
And that was what we call the golden age of TV, because the budgets were bigger. Now, folks, just think of this. In those ancient times, doesn't seem that ancient to talk about early 90s and late 80s, but in that ancient time, there was no Fox News, MSNBC, all those cable channels, Newsmax, all that. I think there was CNN. That was about it. So local stations had budgets to go travel and do things. And as the internet came, and there was no internet. So as the saturation of the market happened, the budgets kind of shrank, but you went through that. You ended up how many years working?
36 years in Dallas-Fort Worth, 46 years total. So it took me 10 years to get to Dallas-Fort Worth. I always told that story too. I was one of those guys that said, if I'm not where I want to be by 30, I'm going to have to think about getting another job. Well, I wasn't where I wanted to be at 30, but I did get a job in Nashville, which kept me going. And then I got to Dallas at 33. And one of the things that surprised me is when Mike Ducey came on with us, and he said he didn't get to Dallas until he was like 36 or 37. And I thought, my goodness, I thought, it took me a long time. And as good as he was and as rapid as his rise was, it took him even a little longer.
Yeah. And the thing about that is, by that age, you would probably give up and say, well, I got to find other work. This isn't going to work for me. Because you can't spend 36 years in a smaller market not making any money. So 36 years, that's unbelievable. If you tell anybody that, they go, how do you survive in any job for that long?
Well, and there were close calls. I mean, there really were close calls where there were misunderstandings, and I got sideways with the wrong people. And, there were times, it really, for the grace of God, but it just worked out that I was able to stay there all that time and go out on my own terms. And when I retired, I made a conscious decision. I'm not burning any bridges at all. If I can help it, it's going to be a love fest going out. And God bless Fox 4 and the managers at Fox 4. They sent me out with, final show on Good Day, final show on 6. They had kind of like some special things, like, wishing me well.
Yeah,
in my
you had
retirement.
a good send off.
Well, and now if that branded me, and I don't know if people realize, because if I would have left with any kind of bitter feelings about anybody, that none of that would have happened. Plus, if you go on and you Google Richard Ray Fox 4, I mean, it's stuff like, the Channel 4 send-off, is on there. You can watch it. And they had Raul Cantu put together this long kind of highlight tape of all the goofy Lone Star Adventures I did and everything. So it just set me up for what I'm doing now, because if somebody wants to know who's this guy Richard Ray that's wants to work on our documentary project, who's this guy we're looking for in a commercial or whatever, just they Google me, and I'm branded in a way that that is advantageous to me.
Even Kyle Ravinsky, who was a junior producer in sports, said that even his real estate business mentioning Channel 4 was a good thing. That was like this, oh, you did that? That's pretty good. So I can see how that helps you now. And you think about that. How long have you been retired?
7 years.
7 years. Any regrets?
No, not at all. In fact, occasionally I think, I should have done it a couple of years earlier. I mean, people don't realize I'm almost 76. So, I mean, waiting till I was 69 to retire was what, I mean, I didn't retire early under any circumstances, but I've got so much energy and so much stuff going on that I almost wish I'd had a couple more years on the front end of this retirement thing. But you mentioned about working at Channel 4. I was working on a commercial for Bojangles Chicken a couple months ago. And it was not a big part. It was not a speaking part. I mean, I was just laughing, kind of sitting next to the main guy laughing at a table. And, it was a funny commercial and everything. And I actually got more FaceTime than virtually anybody but the main guy in the commercial. But I'm sitting there and I'm dealing with this, and somebody recognizes me. I'm walking into the place where we're doing it, by the way, and I run into a guy I play baseball with, and the other guys on the commercial crew, the other actors, realize, you, because they were from Los Angeles and other places too, and you were on TV, you were an anchorman. That to them, that was a huge big deal. These are guys that are making commercials and probably making good money at it, but the fact that I was on TV doing TV news for 46 years, they were really impressed by that. It kind of surprised me.
I know there is something about it. And I tell people that I worked, I was never on the air, and they're like, whoa, you were in there? Because it's so hard to get your foot in the door, and you go, yes, I was inside that door.
It's an exciting business.
Yeah, it is an exciting business. There's a lot of adrenaline. There's all this kind of stuff. You cover big stories. And one story you covered led you to the continent of Africa.
Yes. Now we're getting into mission work, and we did a whole couple of pieces on this earlier, and how I was able to, the first mission trip that Catherine and I went on in 2004 to Kenya led to now 2 decades of mission work since then. And a lot of it started with, I took a camera with, and the station let me do some TV news reports about short-term mission work and that kind of thing. But that has led to so much good in our lives. And again, Kat, for those of you who don't know, my wife passed away about 2 years ago, and I still miss her dearly, and such a shock. But we had such a wonderful experience in mission work over those 20 years, and I continue to do. It's so rewarding, so fulfilling. But yeah, a lot of it started with that first trip to Africa. All of it started with that first trip to Africa.
We're going to take a little break right here. When we come back, let's talk about that, because you're about to embark on a new journey.
I'm going to Africa again. I love doing spots for products I truly believe in, and the Freedom Boat Club Dallas is a perfect example of that. I've proudly partnered with them on Louisville Lake since 2018, and they later added Freedom Boat Club Tacoma. Freedom Boat Club takes the hassle out of boating. You show up, you grab the keys, your boat's ready, you spend the day fishing or skiing or tubing or just cruising around. And then when you're done, you hand the keys back and head home. I've owned boats before, and I can tell you firsthand, ownership comes with expense, maintenance, and yes, headaches. Freedom Boat Club changes all that. Membership includes unlimited access to Louisville Lake and Lake Tacoma, plus reciprocal access to 15 other Texas locations and more than 440 worldwide. Initiation fees start at about $1,900 with flexible monthly plans. If you've been dreaming about lake life without the hassle of ownership, Freedom Boat Club is for you. Just call the number 972-532-1901. Let's go boating.
Okay, we're back. Mission work. What exactly is mission work? What does that mean? Where are you going? What's going on?
Well, mission work can be local missions. I'm involved with local missions. The Freedom House, Denton Freedom House, for example, is a live-in alcohol and drug treatment program.
Yeah,
for
I've
both
heard of that.
Men and women. Awesome program. I've been involved in that for almost 20 years, 20 years probably. So you can do that locally. You can go down to the colonias on the border and help people out and that sort of thing. Short-term missions used to look at our church, at least back 20 years ago, was you would take a bunch of young people and a few adult supervisors. You'd go do some work either in somewhere else in America, maybe a poor area of New Orleans or something, or you'd go to Africa and work as we did in a slum called Ubunga, Kisumu, Kenya. And you do this. You would share the gospel, but do good work, build houses for widows, or there were a number of things, make visits to hospitals and those sorts of things. What has developed more recently in my mission work becomes a little less focused on that sort of street evangelizing and that sort of thing, and more focused on what you can leave behind, how you can help people, show them the love of Jesus through what you do while you're there. And that takes us to where, by the time this airs, I will be on an airplane to Kenya for about this particular mission work I've been on. I think I'm somewhere between 10 and 12 trips now to Kenya over 20 some years.
What have you seen changed over that time?
This is what's wonderful. We started work. This is all because of if you go back, those of you who listen to the podcast, we had an episode with Allison Schlack about how Ndodo for Africa's Future started, with her as a 25-year-old woman just being called by God to go to this slum in Kisumu, Kenya, and start working with a pastor in a small church there. She got us involved in it. The slum was a real hard place called Ubunga. The city's called Kisumu, third largest in Kenya, but the slum's called Ubunga, and it's like the hardest slum in this place. The transformation, Brian, is so remarkable. That's one of the things that takes me back every year, because when we went in there were no stone buildings. There was sewage running in the street. There's still some of that going on now. No roads, not even dirt roads. They were just kind of paths and that sort of thing. No electricity, no running water. Once we went in there and built a church, which at one time we thought was a terrible mistake, later turned out to be a really great thing. But by putting our attention there, the city started to take notice of the slum. We had gotten water in there as a way for the church to make some money, selling for a few Kenya shillings, drinking water. We had done some other things. The city came in, ran water, ran electricity. Other NGOs, nonprofits came in, did other ministries. And now that slum's still a pretty hard place, but if you were there 22 years ago and you go back now, it's amazing. There's a beautiful paved highway that goes by one side of it. They have working roads in there. We're just finishing up a 3-story school for academy we started, Ndodo Academy we started 4 years ago. And that's why I'm leaving, that's why I'm traveling, as you hear this, to Kenya to take over some of the people who invested in that school building. And we're going to have a little grand opening while we're there. Wow. 3-story building that's going to allow us to grow that academy to at least 9 grades. We've got 4 now. I think it's preschool, kindergarten, first, second, and maybe third. But we've added a class every year, and which is different because Endodo is a sponsorship program where people pay X number of dollars a month, starts at $40 a month, to send kids to school all over the country. Yeah, not at our school. There's a few sponsored kids at our school, but the 300 plus kids that are in the program are sent to elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and colleges all over the country. So that's different from this academy we started, which is really part of the community development of our three-legged program. Discipleship, education, community development, because that school provides jobs, provides good schooling, good Christian schooling for the whole city of Kisumu. And so anyway, you can tell I get excited when I start talking about Endodo.
And the people that live there, how did they receive this?
Over the years, they have been our cheerleaders and our protectors, and the community involvement is so important to this because Endodo came and stayed. A lot of these NGOs come, they build a couple of buildings, 4 or 5 years later, they're gone. We stayed. Allison Schlack, that 25-year-old woman, lived there for more than 20 years. She finally got married and had 3 kids there. She just moved back to Texas with her 3 kids and her husband, who is a Kenyan, who's an important part of that Kenya community too. So, Endodo was embraced and loved by the community, and that's allowed us to do what we've done. And also the fact that it's run, day-to-day operation has been run for several years now by the Kenyans. So it's not these Western people coming in and just telling us what to do. It's, we raise the money, we send it over, we give direction, but the actual day-to-day operation is run by Kenyans, and that is so rare in the mission field, and I'm so proud of it.
And that's what I was wondering, because there, obviously a perception that, okay, you're the Western people coming over here to save us and do whatever. But I remember Allison saying that it was self-sustaining by Kenyans, and that was the idea. Sooner or later, they won't need you, right?
Well, what happened over the last decade, maybe going back in a little further than that, for years, it was Danish churches and English churches and European churches would send a lot of money down to have these churches operate and these missions run. Well, the Christian church in Europe has, they're losing membership and things have changed a little bit. And over the years, they've had to cut back in the amount of money that they send to these. And when that happened, they were so used to just taking the check and that once that check stopped coming, oftentimes the mission effort, not the group of believers didn't disappear, but the mission effort would just go away because it had never been self-sustaining, never been self-controlled. It had always been, that's the Europeans sending us our money. So again, I'm very proud of what we've done because, we raise money. Our donors are basically from here. But the day-to-day operation, most of the decisions are being made by, and in some cases, these are people who came, these were young people who started, 16, 17 years ago as sponsored students, came back to Kisumu, didn't take their degree and go to Nairobi or Mombasa or somewhere else in the world. No, they've come back to invest their own investment in the community, which is, again, why I get really excited when I talk about Endodo, NDOTO.org. Endodo means dream in Swahili.
Yeah, go to that website, sponsor a kid.
Yeah, absolutely.
Donate some money. So they're surviving off of donations. What happens if the donations dry up?
Well, that's part of, I'm on the board of directors. It's part of our responsibility to keep at least a year's cushion that if we have another pandemic or something, that we can keep it running.
They can keep
it going. And we are starting to, the school should be self-sufficient within a year or two, we hope, which means the school can run. They're getting tuitions being paid enough to, at this point, big Endodo is helping to defray the cost of the academy. We pay for salaries and some of the other things, but there will become a point in the not too distant future in which Endoto Academy is a self-sustaining, money-making operation, which then can be turned into use it for other things, other entrepreneurial things. You asked about the community. Another thing that we've gone in different directions where we tried raising chickens and selling eggs because eggs were coming from Uganda and they thought they could get better eggs. And well, it turned out to be they could break even, but it didn't really make any money. But some of the buildings they built for the chicken thing, they turned it into a gym, which became a boxing gym, which they got the money to get a Olympic-sized boxing ring. Now they have tournaments there. So the Endoto sports thing, again, all led by the Kenyans who are running the program over there, has turned into this community outreach thing where they've got a men's soccer team that has moved up into the next division in their league, in the county league, and is winning that league and may move up again. And they've got women's softball teams, they've got women's soccer teams, men's soccer teams, and boxers good enough to make the Olympic tryouts. So it's just the athletic program, number one, came from our Kenyan staffers. It was their idea. And number two, it has turned into be a huge asset to the whole community relations and Endoto big picture. That's why when you talk about
that's awesome.
Obunga, you say Endoto, everybody knows Endoto. Everybody knows that's where they got the great soccer team and the boxing program and the school and the church. And so it's really been great.
Started with an egg.
Yeah, the chicken thing didn't work out too good.
But you never know. So
Yeah.
Now I recall you and Allison were talking about promoting entrepreneurship
Yep.
and microloans.
Yep.
Tell me how that's going.
It's still going. Okay. If you guys, any of you people follow my Richard Ray Fox 4 Facebook page, about a month ago, I posted on there when Catherine died, there was an effort to remember her in a special way. One of the entrepreneurial things that I haven't talked about is the church, with a loan from Endoto, was able to buy one of these 18-passenger vans that are used in Kisumu as city buses. And that van is making the church money. Every month, they were able to pay off the loan. They wanted to buy another van because they want to make more money to support the church. Well, the idea, somebody came up with it, I think it was Allison, and maybe a couple of them came up with, let's get a van, let's buy them another van, let's raise some money and give them another loan to get another van and do what they do with all the vans over there is put somebody's name on it. So they put it's the Catherine Ray van.
Oh.
And it's got a picture in the back window of me and Catherine. And of course, I'm getting tears in my eyes when I talk about it. I'm going to see it. I'm going to go ride in the Catherine Ray van. In fact, a day or two after this first hits the air. And I'll
have you seen it?
Yeah, I've got pictures of it. It's beautiful. The picture they used in the back window is one of my favorite pictures of the two of us, and she's so beautiful, and Catherine Ray on the front of it. But again, that's an entrepreneurial thing where they want to get a whole fleet of these vans. And if you get like 5 or 6 of them, you can start a separate company and make even more money because you're not just one van or 2 vans. You're a separate little a group with 5 or 6 or 10 of these vans. So it's a way that the church can raise money. You've got to have somebody to drive these vans, so you're producing jobs. And again, Kenya is one of those places where it's they're very high unemployment. So you can have a really educated guy or gal that struggles getting a job. That's why we talk a lot about Jesus and jobs. That's kind of what Endoto's about.
Okay, so the church, is there a denomination or is it?
It's non-denominational, but it came out of we initially had set up Prince of Peace Kisumu as at least associated with Prince of Peace Carrollton, which is Lutheran, but it's non-denominational over there. But it's very much a Protestant Lutheran doctrine.
Okay.
I would guess, although Yeah, I don't know the doctrinal differences. I just know it's a good Bible-believing, God-fearing church.
So Kenya, what is the predominant religion in Kenya?
Actually, Christians are the majority. Now, when you get to the parts of Mombasa over on the East Coast, that's heavily Muslim, and there are Muslims throughout. But then there's also a lot of tribal religions. So in a lot of these third world countries, they maintain tribal religious practices as part of the culture, but they are Christian. They identify as Christians.
Okay, pretty exciting. You're going there, so I have questions. We're going to take one other break, and then when we come back, I want to kind of go behind the scenes, get in the weeds of how you're getting there. Because that's a long way away. How do you get there? What do you pack? What do you do?
Get a lot of sleep before you go. I love doing spots for products I truly believe in, and the Freedom Boat Club Dallas is a perfect example of that. I proudly partnered with them on Louisville Lake since 2018, and they later added Freedom Boat Club Tacoma. Freedom Boat Club takes the hassle out of boating. You show up, you grab the keys, your boat's ready, you spend the day fishing or skiing or tubing or just cruising around. And then when you're done, you hand the keys back and head home. I've owned boats before, and I can tell you firsthand, ownership comes with expense, maintenance, and yes, headaches. Freedom Boat Club changes all that. Membership includes unlimited access to Louisville Lake and Lake Tacoma, plus reciprocal access to 15 other Texas locations and more than 440 worldwide. Initiation fees start at about $1,900 with flexible monthly plans. If you've been dreaming about lake life without the hassle of ownership, Freedom Boat Club is for you. Just call the number 972-532-1901. Let's go boating.
All right, we're back. We're recording this on a Saturday. You leave on Tuesday. So how do you get to Kenya?
Okay, it starts with there's no way to go direct. So there's a number of different ways to go, but you've got to fly at least one stop. You got to fly to London, you got to fly to Istanbul, you got to fly to Paris, you got to fly to Dubai, Qatar, somewhere.
Direct from here.
Direct from here.
Okay.
You can get directs to that first leg, and then from there you fly to Nairobi. Now, there's a lot of different ways to go, but we're going to go the way most of the time we go is you go through London. So it's like a 6 to 8, 9 hour flight to London. Then you got a layover there in London. Heathrow takes you a while to get around, and so you need a little bit of a layover just to get from one plane to the other, and then it's another 6 hour flight to Nairobi. And so that kind of breaks it up, because if you fly, for example, you fly to Doha, Qatar, it's a 16-hour flight just to get to Qatar.
Ouch.
And then you've got a short flight to Nairobi, but still it's that 16-hour flight that just kills you. So we opted this time to fly through London. Plus you got the Iran war going on right now, which makes Qatar and Doha a little dicey. So we're going through London, but we'll fly out. I think my flight leaves at 3 o'clock Monday afternoon, and then we get into, or Tuesday afternoon, then we get into Nairobi late on Wednesday night. And then we'll stay over at a hotel in Nairobi and get up and take a short hop to Kisumu, which is a little puddle jumper, 45-minute hop to Kisumu.
That's a lot of plane travel there, and I'm kind of a plane buff, so what kind of plane?
Oh, don't ask me. I don't know planes.
You don't know?
I know when you fly, if you fly direct to London, and that's going to be a big one. That'll be, 747 or whatever, 777 or whatever.
Yeah, but so when you go to London to Nairobi, what airline is it?
It's actually, I booked it through American, but it'll be British Airways from London at least. Yeah.
British Airways goes to Nairobi.
Yeah. And then so you book, they're partners, that One World or whatever they call it. So you book through American, but the actual flight from Nairobi to and from Nairobi to London is generally British Airways.
All right, so I've been watching a lot of YouTube travel logs lately. I don't know why. And all the ones that fly to Europe talk about strategy so that you don't land there with jet lag. It doesn't take you another day just to recover. So what do you do? What is your personal?
Well, my strategy is that, it's best if you can land somewhere in the late afternoon to late night and get a good night's sleep that first night. And then generally that takes care of me. Unfortunately, coming back from Nairobi, it's always really late night, sometimes after midnight before you get on. But it doesn't really matter to me because the only difference it makes to me is what time you land in Dallas. Now, if you're going to land in Dallas at 8 o'clock in the morning, that's a problem. Because you really need to stay up until at least 8 or 9 o'clock at night, or you're just going to be totally messed up. I will say that flying west is better because you're kind of following the sun. So I don't know if it tricks your body or whatever, but usually if I get in at sometime after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'll just force myself to stay awake until 8 or 9 o'clock. Try to get that good first night's sleep, and then I'm usually all right.
Then you get back into the regular flow.
Well, what can really mess you up is you fly, and this happened to Catherine and I when we were early on traveling. We flew from Dallas to London and got in at like 8 in the morning. That's the worst possible because you're just jacked up. You're tired. You're beat down. You want to go to sleep. You tell yourself you got to stay awake. And then you get checked into your hotel room and you're going to lay down, take just a little bit of nap. And then next thing you know, it's midnight and you wake up. Now you can't sleep, so but I've never had that much trouble with jet lag if I just make sure that I go to bed at a time that I'll sleep 8 hours or 8 hours plus and not wake up at 2 in the morning.
But somehow you got to adjust to that time zone because when you get to Nairobi, you hit the ground running. Well, you stay in a hotel overnight, but transportation, do you have like Kenyan guides or something that take
what
you
happens,
over there?
We always stay at a hotel that'll make sure they pick you up with a hotel van and then get you back to the airport in the morning to take the flight to Kisumu. And then once you get to Kisumu, and Dodo picks us up. They've got the vans. There'll be the Catherine Ray van will be there to pick us up.
So there's another flight. Yeah. So that's 3 flights.
3 flights, yeah.
Now, what airline do you go on?
Well, it's Kenya Airways. There's Jambo Airwaves. There's a couple different ones, but they're Kenyan airlines, and they're the 2 seats on either side, smaller planes kind of thing. Maybe 3 seats on either side, or 3 on one. 2
jets?
Jets, yeah, they're jets.
Okay.
They're not props.
I didn't know how far is it from Nairobi to
a real short hop of maybe 45 minutes.
Oh, so you're barely
you get up,
at altitude and you're already landing.
Yeah, you get up, you get something to drink, you land, that's about it.
That's like going from here to Austin.
Yeah, very much.
Okay, so anything unusual that you pack? Any kind of shots you take? Anything like that?
Well, you do have to take malarial pills. And I've been doing that for years. And there's different ones. Some people get, there's weekly, there's daily. You want to get those from your doctor before you go. Some people have like really super vivid dreams on some of them. And some people struggle with them. I've never had too much trouble with the malarial pills, but you do need to take the malarial pills. You do need to have yellow fever shots, your tetanus shots. But basically, what we tell people is just go to your doctor, tell him you're going to Kenya. He'll look up what the latest recommendations are. If you need to have something different than you normally have to have, he can tell you. But that should be something you talk to your physician about.
Okay, so one final kind of thought here is the group that you're going with and other trips you've been on, because you've told me about some other trips, but I can't remember the name of the organizations that.
Okay, this is a good story, and let me tell you a little bit about this. It's called Wonder Voyage Legacy. So let me back up a little bit. Kind of one of the really neat things that happened in my life is is that we were doing mission work in Peru years ago, and I've talked about this on previous ones if people want to look it up. But I became involved with a young interpreter, a young man Catherine and I fell in love with. His name is Cesar. And Cesar, long story short, had a dream to make a guest house for mission teams and needed an investor. And Kathy and I came up with some money to help him start that. And he just became one of our God kids over the years. And when he comes to Dallas-Fort Worth, he works with a church out of Arkansas, so he'll fly into Dallas-Fort Worth once in a while. He would stay with us and that sort of thing. Well, about 6-7 years ago, Cesar calls me. He says, "Hey, listen, I'm coming up. I'm working with a new group called Wonder Voyage, and can I stay at your house for a couple of nights?" "Oh, yeah, sure. Come on." In fact, if we're gone, he'll come and bring his wife and his kids and his mother sometimes stay out. But anyway, I said, "Well, what's this group?" And he says, "Well, they're called Wonder Voyage, and they're using me to help set up these trips." And I'd never heard of Wonder Voyage. And I said, "Well, where are they?" And he said, "Well, Sean Small, listener to the program, dear friend of mine now, he lives in Flower Mound, and there's some kind of training they're going to have or something." And I said, "Well, gee, I think I need to meet this Sean Small guy," because I'd never heard of Wonder Voyage. What they did, Sean set up the thing 25 years ago maybe, and they make turnkey trips for mission teams all over the country to go, usually in the States, but sometimes to other parts of the world. They get everything set up, all the logistics, the best guides, the best prices, everything. It's a whole business model called Wonder Voyage. And the whole idea is they want to take people to places where they experience the wonder of God. They experience spiritual moments kind of thing that deepen their faith. So that's the mission. So again, long story short, Cesar introduces me to Sean Small, who's, by the way, had been a fan of the Lone Star Adventures and had watched me on TV for a year. And we become like dear friends immediately. Just love this guy. So Sean came to me after we'd been kind of friends for a couple of years, and he said, "You and Kathy need to go to Honduras next January with this group called Wonder Voyage Legacy." He said, "They are your people. Here's what they do. These are people, a lot of them had been Wonder Voyage guides. They've been involved with Wonder Voyage for various reasons, and Sean himself is part of the legacy. They're people who've got a little extra money. They want to go places and leave something behind, a legacy, thus the name of it. In the first trip, Sean said, they're going down to Honduras. They've raised the money for an X-ray machine for a health clinic that's kind of struggling, lost some funding. They think the X-ray machine will turn the business around, and it was based on kind of a mission-based clinic anyway. And he said, if you go down there and you share your story about Endodo, they're going to want to help Endodo because that's what they do. That's exactly what happened. Catherine and I went, fell in love with this group. They like-minded people. They want to do good. They want to share the gospel. And boom, they said, yeah, tell us more about Endodo, which led to them 3 years ago, Legacy, with Catherine and I, now members of Legacy. We went to Obunga, Kenya, Endodo, after they raised money for a computer lab in our academy, the first computer lab in an elementary school anywhere in the city, right? So again, they wanted to go see what we're doing there. They wanted to see the computer lab. And then, of course, you go on safari after that and have this trip of a lifetime. So the group I'm going with as we speak is, again, a legacy group. This time they helped raise some money for the 3-story academy school building that I talked about that we're going to dedicate. And what happened in the last trip was after they saw Endodo on the ground, after they met Allison and her husband Michael and saw the staff and what the staff was doing, they immediately went to Allison and said, we are so impressed by what you guys are doing. We've never seen a mission organization operated this well. We want to do something for you. Give us one thing that you could use right now. And she said, well, we could really use a van because we got these sports teams, we have to put them on different city buses. If we could get a van just to take the sports team. Also with the academy, we're trying to attract students from other parts of the city that aren't in a slum, and that, if we can tell them your kids will be bused to and from school, you don't have anything to worry about, that'll increase. So we could really use a van. They said, well, how much do you need? Well, she said, I think we could get one out of Nairobi for like $17,000. So they said, no problem. Within a week's time, they had raised $17,000. Well, while they're doing that, Allison and Michael are shopping around for a van, and they find a guy in Kisumu who's got 2 vans. And he says, I'll sell them both to you for $19,000.
Oh.
And so Allison, she's going, I said, well, ask them. They probably could raise another. She said, can you raise another $2,000? And they say, no problem. Boom. So there are 2 vans now there that were bought by the Legacy people. And now, actually, the Catherine Ray van is also was from a donation by Legacy.
So Legacy means, and you told me this off air, that you go on these trips and you leave something behind. You leave a legacy behind.
Right. Absolutely. And plus, these are guys who, they love adventure, guys and gals who love adventure too. So it was perfect to go to Kenya because after you get done with setting up the computer lab or whatever, you can go on a safari for a few days.
So go do something for mankind and go have a little fun.
Absolutely.
Nobody said you can't have fun.
That's right.
Well, this has been enlightening, and I really appreciate you diving into this, telling us more about your career, but also the mission work. Is this something you do every year, or you go somewhere every year?
It's growing, Brian, especially since I lost Catherine. The Legacy people, the Wonder Voyage people, and a subset of that called Boundless Expeditions, which is an invitation-only kind of group. Another thing that it's all the missionary guys and gals, but they're not doing mission trip. They're just going to places to do
just fun
things that the tourists don't see. So you go way off the beaten track. That's why it's called beaten track. That's why it's called Boundless Expeditions. I posted about a trip to Trinidad, Tobago about 6 weeks ago with some of that. If you want to check out my Facebook page. But
are there websites for all these organizations?
Yeah, there are. Again, BE, Boundless Expeditions, is an invitation-only group. But the way to get involved with that is to get involved with wondervoyage.com, Wonder Voyage Legacy. If you also Google that, you'll come up with Legacy. And Legacy is something you can get involved with. We have a number of things going on with Legacy beyond this trip that I'm on right now.
Okay. Well, we need to make sure, by the way, in case you didn't know, Richard writes all the descriptions, the lead-ins for the podcast. Well, he doesn't write them alone. He writes them with your buddy, what's his name,
ChatGPT. He helps me a little.
He helps you a little. We all need that help.
Well, he cleans up my writing. The punctuation, at least, he'll clean it up.
Right. And I use Grammarly for that same. So then you just put a bunch of stuff on paper, and that's another podcast.
Yeah.
But can you include those websites?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, of course, we're getting some more advertisers. I think hopefully in this one we will have a advertisement for the Freedom Boat Club Dallas. I think you've already heard that on the program, and we'll add some stuff on that. If you want to get involved in that, that's something I really believe in.
Very good. Well, I appreciate you coming by. You're leaving Tuesday. Godspeed to you. Have a wonderful trip. Hopefully.
I'm about to say this. You need to go with me in a year or two.
Yes. I need to do more of this kind of
Amen.
This kind of stuff. Is there any way we could do a program with you over there, maybe at the dedication or?
Well, I was going to say, it's a 9-hour difference, but if you wanted to call me on a Saturday morning at like 9 o'clock, it would be like early evening over there. So it might be just from my hotel room, but yeah, we could do that.
Yeah, we could do that. All right. Have a good trip, Richard, and we'll see you when you get back.
Thank you, brother.